The night my father-in-law turned 65, our backyard was full of guests, church friends, business partners, everyone who believed the Whitmore family was perfect. What none of them knew was that for almost a year, I had been sleeping in their garage, while my mother-in-law told everyone I was unstable after having my baby. She controlled my phone, my money, even the story people believed about me. By the time my father accidentally discovered the truth, $148,200 had quietly disappeared from my bank account, and the person who took it was standing right there at that birthday party, smiling like nothing had happened. My name is Ilara Whitmore. I am 33 years old, a freelance graphic designer who works from home, or at least I used to. My daughter Isla had been born just a few months earlier in late 2023, and the first year of her life had been a blur of sleepless nights, warm bottles, and quiet moments when she fell asleep on my shoulder. Nathan had received the assignment with almost no warning. Apex Defense Systems needed him in Ramstein for a systems project connected to a contractor network. The contract would last about 10 months. I remember the night we talked about it in our kitchen in Colorado Springs. Nathan sat across from me with a laptop open on the table and the soft yellow light above the sink reflecting on the counter. Isla was asleep in the bassinet beside me. "It is only temporary," he said. 10 months, maybe less. I asked him what we were supposed to do while he was gone. He hesitated before answering. "My parents have plenty of space. You would not have to be alone with the baby." His parents lived 15 minutes away in the Briargate neighborhood, in one of those large suburban houses with wide lawns and identical mailboxes along the street. It was the kind of place where every driveway held a polished SUV and every porch had seasonal decorations. At the time, it sounded practical. Nathan promised it would only be until he came home. I agreed. The first few weeks in the Whitmore house felt almost peaceful. Judith Whitmore welcomed me with the kind of warmth that made everything seem easier. She was 62 years old and deeply involved in St. Gabriel Church, where she organized charity drives and food programs for families in need. People in the community treated her with respect, the way people do when someone seems to represent everything good about faith and family. She cooked dinners that filled the house with the smell of roasted chicken and herbs. She held Isla when I needed a shower. She asked if I had slept enough the night before. Clifford was quieter but polite. At 65, he ran Whitmore Contracting LLC, a construction company that had been in the area for years. He spoke with the calm confidence of someone who believed every decision he made was the correct one. "You are family," Clifford told me the first week. "This house has plenty of room." I believed him. The changes did not happen all at once. They began with things small enough to ignore. One morning, Judith stood in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and said she had been thinking about my car. "You just had a baby," she said gently. "You should not be driving too much right now. Let Clifford take it to the shop and have everything checked." Clifford nodded and took the keys. I never thought much about it at the time. My days revolved around Isla anyway. Days passed. Then another week. Whenever I asked about the car, Clifford would say the mechanic was still looking at something. Eventually, I stopped asking. A few days later, Judith mentioned something about our phone plans. "Since Nathan is overseas, it might be easier if your phone is on our family plan," she said. "That way we can all reach each other easily." She took my phone for a few minutes and changed the settings. At first, it seemed harmless, but a few days later, I noticed something strange. My phone started showing location sharing alerts connected to the Whitmore family account. I told myself it was just a feature I did not understand. Then came the paperwork. It happened the day before Nathan flew out of Denver. Clifford sat at the dining table with a small stack of documents. "Since Nathan will be overseas, there are a few financial forms we need signed, things connected to contractor regulations and family accounts, just standard authorization." Nathan was packing in the other room, and the house felt rushed and chaotic. I signed the pages without reading them carefully. At the time, it seemed like a minor formality. The first month passed quietly. Judith continued helping with Isla. She brought laundry down from upstairs and sometimes folded the tiny clothes while humming hymns under her breath. But gradually, the tone of her questions began to change. How much are you spending on groceries this week? Why did that payment show up in your account? Are you sure you're feeling emotionally stable after the baby? At first, I answered politely. Then I noticed something else. Whenever money arrived from my freelance work, the balance in my account would drop a few days later. Judith said she was moving funds into the family account so everything would be easier to manage while Nathan was gone. You should not worry about money right now, she told me. Your focus should be the baby. Then one afternoon, she came into the room I had been using upstairs. The heating system is acting up in this part of the house, she said. Just for a few weeks, we're going to move you downstairs. Downstairs meant the garage. The space had a narrow bed that folded out against the wall, a portable heater, and shelves filled with Clifford's tools. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and cold metal. Judith smiled reassuringly. It's only temporary. I believed her. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. By the middle of winter, the garage had become my world. Every morning I carried Isla through the side door and into the yard so she could see sunlight. Sometimes neighbors would wave from across the street. Sometimes they simply watched. One of them was Margot Hale, a schoolteacher who lived 2 houses down. She was always polite, but there was a long, curious look in her eyes whenever she saw where I was coming from. Judith spoke frequently about my situation at church. I learned this indirectly. One Sunday afternoon, a woman from the congregation approached me in the grocery store parking lot and gently asked how I was coping after the baby. Before I could answer, she said Judith had told everyone I was dealing with postpartum depression and needed extra support. The words felt strange in my ears. I'd never said I was depressed. But from that point on, people looked at me differently. Back at the Whitmore house, the routines became more rigid. Judith controlled the grocery money, Clifford still had my car, my phone remained tied to the family account. Whenever Nathan called from Germany, Judith often appeared nearby, smiling and asking about his work. The conversations were short. I told myself it would end when Nathan came home. Then, one winter night, something happened that changed the way I saw everything. Snow had fallen during the afternoon, leaving the driveway silent under a layer of white. Isla had finally fallen asleep in my arms after hours of fussing. The garage heater rattled softly in the corner. I was standing beside the small bed when the door opened. Clifford walked down the short steps of stairs from the house into the garage. He looked around slowly. The folding bed, the plastic bin of baby supplies, the portable heater struggling against the cold air. Then he looked at me. "You should be grateful we let you stay here," he said calmly. For a moment, I didn't answer. I looked at my sleeping daughter. I looked at the dim light above the workbench and the shadows of tools hanging along the wall. Something inside me shifted. Until that moment, I had believed this situation was temporary, an inconvenience, a strange misunderstanding that would resolve itself when Nathan returned. Standing there in the garage, I understood something different. This was not temporary. This was control. And somewhere inside the large, quiet house above me, the people who controlled everything believed I would never challenge it. I held Isla a little closer and listened to the wind outside the garage door. For the first time since moving into the Whitmore house, I realized that I had no idea how far this situation might go, and no one outside that house seemed to know what was happening.
Chapter 2. The Story They Told About Me. That was the lie I repeated to myself through the end of winter and into the slow beginning of spring. I was buying time until Nathan came home, buying time until the house repairs upstairs were finished, buying time until something shifted. But time inside the Whitmore house did not move the way it should. It did not pass. It tightened. Within a few weeks, my sleeping in the garage stopped being treated like a temporary inconvenience. No one mentioned the heating upstairs anymore. No one spoke about moving me back. Judith no longer apologized for the arrangement, and Clifford stopped pretending it would change soon. The garage became my place, or more accurately, the place they had quietly decided I belonged. Judith made that shift seem completely reasonable to everyone else. At St. Gabriel Church, she began telling people a very careful version of my life. She never said anything dramatic. That was the brilliance of it. Her voice always carried concern instead of accusation. She told people motherhood had been difficult for me. She said I was exhausted, overwhelmed, struggling after the baby. She said the family was helping me through a fragile time. She never called me unstable. She did not need to. People filled in that word on their own. The first time I realized how completely she had shaped that story was on a Sunday morning in March. Judith suggested it might be good for me to come to church. Fresh air, she said, community support. Isla had barely slept that week, and my body felt hollow from exhaustion, but I went anyway. Some part of me still believed that if people saw me clearly, if they heard my voice, the story Judith was building might begin to crack. The sanctuary was warm with morning light pouring through tall windows. People greeted Judith easily, thanking her for organizing the last charity event. After the service, a woman approached me and touched my arm gently. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" I smiled automatically. "I am okay, just tired. The baby keeps me up most nights." Before the woman could answer, Judith stepped closer. "She says that on her good days," she said with a sympathetic laugh. The shift in the woman's expression was immediate. Her eyes softened in a way that made my stomach tighten. Not sympathy for a tired mother, sympathy for someone people believe cannot fully trust herself. Around us, I felt the quiet change in the room. People spoke more softly. They watched me with cautious kindness. I turned toward Judith. "I am just tired." "Of course you are, dear," she replied warmly. "We are all here to support you." The conversation drifted away, but something inside me had already changed. That was the moment I understood Judith was not just controlling my life inside the house. She was controlling how the world outside saw me. On the drive home, she kept her eyes on the road. "You should not get defensive when people are trying to help," she said calmly. I was not defensive. She glanced at me briefly. "That is exactly what I mean, Alara. Sometimes you do not hear yourself clearly anymore." I watched the quiet Briargate streets slide past the window. Perfect lawns, identical houses. A neighborhood built on the idea that nothing ugly happened behind closed doors. Back home, the financial situation became tighter. Judith told me Nathan had transferred enough money to cover expenses while he was overseas, but it made more sense for her to manage everything. She said it would reduce stress for me while I adjusted to motherhood. Every Monday morning, she handed me a small envelope of cash, groceries, baby supplies if needed. The amount was just enough to survive the week if I planned carefully. I began taking on more freelance work at night once Isla finally slept. Small design projects, logo updates, social media graphics for a few clients I had worked with before she was born. The folding table in the garage became my office. My laptop glowed in the dim light while Isla slept in her crib and the small heater rattled beside the wall. Those quiet hours were the only time that still felt like my life. Then, I began noticing something strange. Whenever a client payment arrived in my account, I felt relief for a day or two. Then, the balance would drop again. At first, I blamed exhaustion. Sleep deprivation makes numbers blur. But the pattern kept repeating. Money appeared, then it vanished. One morning, I asked Judith about it while she stood at the stove making eggs. "I think something is wrong with my bank account. Money keeps disappearing." She did not turn around. "I moved some of it into the household account," she said calmly. "It's easier to manage everything together." Without telling me. She slid the eggs onto a plate before answering. "Nathan and I discussed it before he left. You signed the authorization forms." My stomach tightened. "What forms?" She finally turned. "The financial paperwork Clifford gave you before Nathan flew out. Honestly, Alara, I don't know why you make everything harder than it needs to be." I wanted to argue, but Isla began crying from the other room, and Judith walked past me before I could say anything else. The moment ended the way it always did, incomplete. Later that week, Nathan began asking questions from Germany. The first message arrived after midnight. "These restaurant charges are yours." I stared at the phone. "No, I barely used the card." His response came quickly. "Mom said you've been spending more lately." My chest tightened. That's not true. The next day, we managed a short video call. Nathan looked tired. The temporary housing behind him near Ramstein was plain and colorless. "Are you okay, really?" I opened my mouth to answer. Judith set a stack of folded towels down loudly behind me. "She's had a difficult week, Nathan," she said with a sympathetic laugh. The shift in Nathan's smile was slight. He did not argue with Judith. He did not ask me more questions after that conversation. He only said he loved us and wanted us to be okay. After that, our calls became shorter. Judith was always nearby. Clifford walked through the garage constantly. Lydia seemed to appear halfway through conversations with stories about her new business. Lydia Whitmore had recently launched an online store called Moonhaven Crystals. She was 37 and carried herself with effortless confidence. "Orders are crazy right now. Everyone wants healing crystals and energy sets," she told Judith one afternoon while stacking shipping boxes on the counter. Judith smiled proudly. "I knew you would make something of it." Lydia lowered her voice. "I just need one more big shipment to scale everything." Judith nodded. "Everything is handled." I stood at the sink, rinsing Isla's bottles while they spoke, as if I were invisible. A few days later, I watched Lydia load several new boxes into her car while I stood in the garage counting how many cans of formula we had left. That afternoon, the driveway froze after a quick sleet storm. I struggled to push Isla's stroller toward the sidewalk. Margot Hale, the retired teacher who lived 2 houses down, walked across the yard toward me. "Need help?" I nodded. She steadied the stroller while I adjusted the wheels. Then she glanced toward the open garage door. "Why are you sleeping out there?" The question caught me completely off guard. For a moment, I almost told the truth. "Because I don't think I have any choice anymore. Because everything in my life is slowly being taken away." But the back door opened. Judith stepped outside holding a folded baby blanket. "Margot," she said warmly, "Isla likes the quiet space for work. The baby keeps odd hours." Margot looked from Judith to me. "If you say so." Judith laughed lightly. "We're just trying to make things easier for her." Margot did not argue, but the look she gave me before walking away told me she didn't completely believe what she had heard. That night, the garage felt colder than usual. Isla finally fell asleep close to midnight. I opened my laptop and began sorting through old emails. I don't know why I checked the spam folder. Maybe instinct, maybe desperation. Most of the emails were junk. Then I saw the bank alerts. I opened the first one, transfer confirmation. Then another, external transfer processed. And another. The amounts were large, thousands of dollars. My pulse began to race as I opened each message. Every transfer listed the same destination account, Moonhaven Crystals LLC, Lydia's company. I sat frozen at the folding table while the heater hummed quietly beside my wall and Isla breathed softly in her crib. For months, I had wondered if exhaustion was making me paranoid. Now, the truth was glowing on the screen in front of me. The money was real, the transfers were real, and for the first time since moving into the Whitmore house, I finally had proof that none of this had ever been in my head.
Chapter 3: The Money That Was Missing. For the rest of that night, I did not sleep. I sat at the folding table in the garage with my laptop open, staring at the bank alerts again and again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. They did not. Every transfer was real. The dates stretched across almost a full year. The amounts were never small enough to be accidental,
but never large enough to immediately trigger a bank alert. 2,000, 5,000, 8,000, sometimes 12. By the time I finished opening every email, my hands were trembling. The total number of transfers was 23. The money had been moving out of my account slowly, quietly, month after month, and every single one went to the same place, Moonhaven Crystals LLC, Lydia's company. I closed the laptop slowly and looked toward Isla sleeping in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of deep sleep. For months, I had wondered if the exhaustion had been warping my mind. Judith had been careful with that narrative. The church believed it. Nathan was beginning to believe it. But numbers did not lie. I whispered to myself in the quiet garage. They took it. The words sounded strange out loud. They took my money. And suddenly, the past 11 months started to make a terrible kind of sense. I barely slept before dawn. The next morning, everything in the house felt normal again. Judith moved through the kitchen making coffee. Clifford read the newspaper at the table. Lydia had apparently driven back to Denver during the night after dropping off another round of shipping supplies. No one looked like a person who had stolen anything. That was the most disturbing part. For several days, I said nothing. I needed to think. More importantly, I needed someone outside that house to see what I had seen. That person arrived unexpectedly a few weeks later. It was a cold afternoon at the beginning of 2025 when I heard a car pull into the driveway. The engine sounded familiar. I stepped out of the garage just as the door of an old pickup truck opened. My father stepped out slowly. Adrian Caldwell was 61 years old and had spent most of his life running a small auto repair garage outside Denver. His hands were permanently rough from decades of engine grease and winter cold. When he saw me standing there with Isla in my arms, his face softened. "There she is," he said quietly. He had never visited the Whitmore house before. Judith came out of the back door with her usual polite smile. "Adrian," she said warmly, "what a surprise." Dad shook her hand politely. "I was driving through Colorado Springs and figured I should finally meet my granddaughter properly." Judith laughed softly. "You are always welcome here." Clifford appeared behind her and offered a firm handshake. The moment felt ordinary, until my father glanced past them toward the garage. He saw the folding table, the portable heater, the crib beside the wall. His eyes moved slowly across the space. He did not say anything. Not then. We went through the motions of a polite visit for another hour. Judith made coffee, Clifford talked about a new construction contract. Isla slept peacefully in Dad's arms while he rocked her gently. But I could feel his attention returning again and again to the garage. Eventually, he turned toward me. "How about lunch?" he said. Judith immediately offered to cook something. Dad shook his head. I promised Alara a proper burger. The moment we were in his truck and driving away from the house, the silence stretched for almost 2 full minutes. Then he asked the question, "Why are you living in a garage?" His voice was calm, but the question landed like a door finally opening. I stared out the windshield. I didn't start there. He waited. So I told him everything. Not in a neat story. The words came out in pieces. The move after Nathan left for Germany, Judith managing the money, the envelopes of grocery cash, the church conversations, the missing bank transfers. By the time we pulled into a small diner on the edge of town, my throat felt raw. Dad listened without interrupting. We sat in a booth near the window. The waitress brought coffee and burgers. Isla slept in the carrier beside me. Dad pulled his phone out. "Show me your bank account." I hesitated for a moment. Then I opened the app and handed him the phone. He scrolled slowly through the transaction history. His jaw tightened. "Download everything," he said. "What?" "The full transaction history, every month." Within a few minutes, the bank had generated the records.
Dad began adding numbers on a small notepad he carried in his jacket pocket. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, he set the pen down. "Do you know how much money left this account?" I shook my head. He turned the paper toward me. $148,200. For a moment, I thought I had read the number wrong. What? 23 transfers, he said quietly, over 11 months. My stomach dropped. And they all go to the same place? I already knew the answer. Moonhaven Crystals, LLC. Dad leaned back in the booth. "Lydia." I nodded slowly. He rubbed a hand over his face. Jesus. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he reached for his phone. "I want someone else to look at this." "Who?" "An old friend." He dialed and waited. When the call connected, his voice shifted into a relaxed tone of someone speaking to a long, trusted colleague. "Robert, it's Adrian Caldwell." A pause. "Yeah, still fixing trucks." He glanced at me. "I need a favor. Something financial." Another pause. "I think my daughter might be getting robbed." The man he had called was Robert Kincaid. Robert had spent more than 30 years working as a financial investigator for the Colorado Bureau of Investigation before retiring. That evening, we drove to a quiet house outside Denver, where Robert now lived. He greeted us at the door wearing reading glasses and holding a tablet. Inside his office, he studied the transaction records carefully. He zoomed in on dates and amounts. Then he leaned back. "There is a pattern here." "What kind of pattern?" Dad asked. Robert tapped the screen. "Spacing between transfers, consistent account destination, structured amounts." He looked at me. "These do not look random." "What does that mean?" "It means someone knew exactly what they were doing." Dad crossed his arms. "Fraud?" Robert nodded slowly. "It could be." Then he asked another question. "What paperwork did you sign before your husband left the country?" My stomach tightened again. Clifford had given me several documents that day. Robert studied them carefully. One of the forms allowed Clifford to access my account in case of family emergencies. Robert tapped the page. This document could allow someone to initiate transfers. Dad looked furious now. So he had the key. Robert nodded. And someone else had the business account receiving the money. Lydia. The room fell quiet. Finally, Dad spoke. "What do we do?" Robert folded his hands. "You talk to a lawyer first." 2 days later, we met with Thomas Vale in a small office in downtown Denver. Thomas was a civil attorney who specialized in financial disputes. He read through the transaction records carefully. When he finished, he looked up at me. "You have grounds to file a complaint." "What kind?" "Financial fraud at minimum." Dad leaned forward to, "Can it go to investigators?" Thomas nodded. "If the evidence holds up." The words felt unreal. For almost a year, I had lived inside a house where my reality was constantly questioned. Now, 3 different people were looking at the same numbers and seeing exactly what I had seen, the truth. That night, when I returned to Colorado Springs, the Whitmore house looked exactly like it always did. The kitchen lights were on. Judith moved through the room preparing dinner. Clifford watched television. Nothing about them suggested that the ground beneath their lives had just started to shift. But across the ocean, something else was beginning to change. Nathan had started questioning the credit card charges more seriously, and for the first time since he left for Germany, the transactions were no longer making sense to him either. The story Judith had told him was starting to crack, and this time the numbers were not on her side. Chapter 4. The Plan. Nathan calls me 3 nights later, and for the first time in months, Judith was not standing close enough to hear. It was nearly midnight in Colorado Springs and early morning in Germany. Isla had finally fallen asleep after crying for almost an hour, and I was sitting on the edge of the folding bed in the garage when my phone lit up. Nathan. I stared at his name for a second before answering.
His face appeared on the screen, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. The room behind him in Ramstein was dim and quiet, and this time the door was closed. "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Good." His voice was steady but different from the distant tone our calls had taken for months. "Show me everything." I turned the phone and opened the bank records, the transfers, the totals, the account name that had been draining my life piece by piece for almost a year. Moonhaven Crystals, LLC. Nathan did not interrupt. His eyes moved slowly across the screen while I scrolled through the transaction history. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. $148,000. Yes. And all of it went to Lydia? Yes. He pressed his lips together and looked away from the camera for a long moment. When he looked back, something in his face had hardened. I knew something was wrong. I said nothing. For months, my credit card statements kept climbing, he continued quietly. Gas charges, restaurants, supplies. Every time I asked about it, my mom had an explanation. He rubbed his eyes. "She always answered before you could." I felt a lump form in my throat. She was always there. I know. The silence between us stretched for a moment. Then he said something I had been waiting to hear for months. "I believe you." The words hit harder than I expected. I closed my eyes briefly because relief and anger rose together in my chest. "I told you the truth." "I know," he said. "I should have pushed harder." He looked down again at the numbers. "What does Robert think?" "He thinks it is fraud." "And the lawyer?" "He says there is enough evidence to bring investigators in." Nathan leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a moment. "My father gave you those forms." "Yes." "And Lydia's business got the money." "Yes." His jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked like the version of Nathan I remembered before everything started falling apart. Quiet, focused, very still when he was angry. "I am calling my mother tomorrow," he said. Robert shut that idea down immediately. The next afternoon, we were sitting in his office while Isla slept in her carrier beside my chair. Dad stood near the window, arms folded. Robert was reviewing the transaction reports again. "No," he said calmly. "You are not calling anyone yet." Nathan's voice came through the speaker from Germany. "They stole from my wife. And if you confront them now, they will start covering their tracks," Robert replied. "People who move money like this already know how to hide it." Dad nodded once. "He's right." Nathan exhaled slowly. "So what do we do?" Robert tapped the stack of Trenta transactions. "We build the case properly." Over the next 2 weeks, that is exactly what happened. Robert traced every transfer. Thomas Vale helped organize the financial timeline. Together, they mapped the money in a way that made the situation even worse than I had imagined. The money had not simply disappeared into Lydia's business. Some of it had been used to pay debts connected to Whitmore Contracting, LLC. Some funded inventory purchases from Moonhaven Crystals. Other payments covered Lydia's personal spending, online shipping software, packaging supplies, luxury spa appointments, even a weekend retreat Lydia had posted about proudly on social media. I sat in Robert's office staring at the documents while Dad stood behind my chair. "So they used my account to pay their bills," I said quietly. Robert nodded. "That is what it looks like." Dad shook his head slowly. "They thought she would never notice." Robert glanced at me. "They also built a story that made it easier if you did." The story, the postpartum depression, the unstable young mother who needed supervision, the woman whose memory and judgment couldn't quite be trusted. Suddenly, it all felt less like coincidence and more like strategy. The plan itself came together almost by accident. One morning, Judith called while I was feeding Isla breakfast. "Don't forget next Saturday," she said cheerfully.
"Your father-in-law's birthday dinner. We have a full house coming." I murmured something polite while she talked. She described the guest list in detail: business partners from Whitmore Contracting, neighbors from Briargate, several people from church. Lydia volunteered to decorate the dining room. When the call ended, I sat very still. Then I called Robert. He listened quietly while I explained. When he finished, he said one simple sentence: "That might be the perfect room." By that evening, he had already spoken to Thomas and to Nathan. The logic behind the plan was painfully clear. The Whitmores cared deeply about one thing above everything else: reputation. Clifford's construction business depended on trust and relationships. Judith's identity inside the church community was built on generosity and moral authority. A quiet, private confrontation would allow them to lie, deny, shift blame, and bury the situation. A public one would not. Nathan agreed almost immediately. "I want them answering questions in front of the people they've been lying to," he said during the next call. There was no anger in his voice now, just a cold determination that made the room feel smaller. The next step was evidence. The day before the party, Nathan called Judith. Robert wanted the conversation recorded. Colorado law was discussed carefully until everyone was sure the call could be preserved properly. Nathan called her when he knew she would answer alone. Later, I listened to the recording in Robert's office. Judith sounded delighted to hear from her son. Then Nathan asked about me. He asked if I was really struggling the way she kept telling people. There was a pause. Then Judith sighed in the familiar tired tone she used whenever she talked about my supposed condition. "Nathan, I've been trying to protect her," she said. "Ilara is not stable right now. She gets confused about money, and I've been managing things for her because she's not in a place to do it herself." Robert stopped the recording. He replayed that line again. Then he looked at me. "That helps." It showed intent, control, awareness. Judith was not simply watching money move through the family. She was justifying it. The evidence package went to Detective Erin Morales from the Colorado Springs Financial Crimes Unit. I met her 2 days later in a small office downtown. She was direct and professional, the kind of person who clearly cared very little about the social standing of the Whitmore family. She read through the financial timeline carefully. "This is enough for us to begin an investigation," she said. Dad leaned forward. "Does that mean arrests?" She headed her head. "It means we watch what happens next." Robert explained the upcoming birthday dinner. Detective Morales listened carefully. "If I appear at that house," she said calmly, "it will be because I already have reason to be there. No theatrics, no chaos that contaminates the evidence." Robert nodded. "Understood." When we left her office, the plan felt real. Back at the Whitmore house, nothing had changed. Judith spent the entire week preparing for the birthday dinner. Lydia brought flowers and champagne. Clifford walked around the house with the relaxed confidence of a man who believed his life was exactly where it should be. The hardest part for me was acting normal. I still slept in the garage. I still accepted the envelopes of grocery money. I still nodded politely when Judith corrected me in front of other people. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer just surviving. I was waiting. The night before the party, I sat in the quiet garage with Isla asleep beside me. From upstairs, I could hear Judith laughing in the kitchen while she organized serving trays. Tomorrow, that laugh would sound very different. For the first time in months, the fear that lived in my chest was gone. In its place was something colder: focus. And upstairs, the Whitmores were still preparing for what they believed would be an ordinary family celebration.
Chapter 5: The Night the Truth Came Out. The evening of Clifford Whitmore's 65th birthday arrived warm and bright, the kind of Colorado summer evening where the sky stays pale blue long after sunset. By late afternoon, the Whitmore backyard was already full. White folding tables stretched across the lawn. Lydia had arranged crystal bowls filled with polished stones between flower centerpieces that looked like something from a wedding reception. Judith moved through the yard greeting people with perfect warmth, her smile effortless, her voice carrying the confident tone of someone who believed she had built a life everyone admired. Clifford stood near the grill, talking with several men from Whitmore Contracting, laughing loudly, one hand resting on a glass of bourbon. Neighbors arrived carrying wine bottles. Couples from St. Gabriel Church gathered near the patio. People complimented Judith on the decorations and told Clifford how lucky he was to have such a devoted family. From the outside, it looked exactly like the life they had spent years building. A successful business owner, a respected church volunteer, a tight-knit family celebrating together. I stood near the back fence holding Isla in my arms and watched it all unfold. Margot Hale arrived a few minutes later. When she saw me, she gave a small nod that felt more like understanding than greeting. The sun began to lower behind the houses, and strings of patio lights flickered on above the yard. Eventually, Judith tapped a spoon lightly against her glass. The soft, ringing sound pulled everyone's attention toward the patio. She stood beside the outdoor table where the birthday cake waited, one hand resting lightly on Clifford's shoulder. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said warmly. "Clifford means so much to this community, and we're grateful to celebrate with the people who have supported our family for so many years." People nodded and smiled. Then she turned toward the laptop sitting on the table. Nathan wanted to be here tonight, but his work overseas made that impossible, so we arranged a video call. The laptop screen flickered to life. Nathan appeared, sitting in a small room in Germany, the same neutral walls behind him that I had seen during our late-night conversations. People leaned closer to see him. Clifford raised his glass. "There's my boy." Nathan smiled slightly, but it was not the relaxed smile people expected. "Hi, everyone," he said. Several guests called greetings back. Judith rested one hand on the laptop as if guiding the moment. Nathan just wanted to say a few words for his father's birthday. Nathan nodded slowly. "Actually, I do want to say something." His voice was calm. "I want to talk about money." The yard grew quieter. At first, people assumed he was joking. Nathan looked down briefly at something on his desk, then back at the camera. "Over the past 11 months, 23 transfers were made from my wife's bank account." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Clifford frowned. Nathan continued. "January 12th, $4,600. He read the number carefully. February 3rd, $6,000. People began looking at each other. Judith's smile tightened. Nathan kept going. March 19th, $8,300. His voice did not rise, it did not waver. It simply continued listing dates and amounts. By the 6th transaction, the backyard had gone completely silent. Clifford lowered his glass slowly. "What is this supposed to mean?" he said. Nathan did not respond to him. He looked directly into the camera. "Every one of those transfers went to the same business account." He paused. "Moon Haven Crystals, LLC." Lydia's face drained of color. Someone near the grill shifted uncomfortably. Nathan spoke again. "The total amount transferred was $148,200. The number hung in the air like something physical. Clifford stepped forward. "This is nonsense." Nathan's voice remained calm. "I also want everyone to hear something." The laptop speakers crackled softly. Then Judith's voice filled the yard. "Nathan, I have been trying to protect her. Ilara is not stable right now. She gets confused about money, and I have been managing things for her." Several people gasped quietly. Judith froze beside the table. The recording ended. For a moment, no one moved. Clifford turned toward his wife. "What is he doing?" Judith looked at the laptop, then at the guests surrounding her. "This is a misunderstanding. Nathan must have taken something out of context." Nathan's voice came back through the speakers. "It is not out of context."
He looked toward the camera again. I saw the statements myself. Clifford shook his head. You have no idea what you are talking about. At that moment, a woman stepped through the open gate leading to the backyard. Detective Irene Morales walked onto the patio with calm authority. Several guests stepped aside instinctively. She looked around the yard once before speaking. My name is Detective Irene Morales with the Colorado Springs Financial Crimes Unit. Her voice carried clearly across the lawn. We are currently reviewing a series of financial transactions connected to the account of Ilara Whitmore. Clifford's face turned red. This is ridiculous. Detective Morales remained completely still. Mr. Whitmore, we will be requesting your cooperation as part of an ongoing investigation. Judith stepped forward quickly. This is a family misunderstanding. Detective Morales looked at the printed documents Robert had prepared, now spread across the patio table beside the laptop. Each page listed transfers, dates, and account numbers. Several of Clifford's business partners were standing close enough to see them. One man quietly set his drink down. Another exchanged a glance with someone beside him. The mood of the party had completely changed. Clifford tried again. There must be some mistake. Nathan's voice came from the laptop one more time. There isn't. No one laughed now. A few of the guests from church quietly stepped toward the gate. One of Clifford's contractors shook his head and walked toward the street without saying goodbye. Lydia had backed away toward the corner of the yard, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Margot stood near the fence, watching everything with quiet understanding. I remained where I was, holding Isla against my shoulder. For months, I had lived in that garage feeling invisible. Now, every eye in the yard seemed to understand exactly what had happened. The party ended slowly after that. No shouting, no dramatic scene, just the quiet collapse of an illusion. Over the next few weeks, the consequences unfolded faster than I expected. Whitmore Contracting became the subject of a financial inquiry connected to the missing funds. Moonhaven Crystals was flagged for a tax review by the IRS after investigators traced the transfers. Judith stepped down from the leadership committee at St. Gabriel Church. People who once admired her began asking very different questions. Nathan returned to the United States a few months later. The first night he came back, we drove north to Denver with Isla sleeping in her car seat. Dad met us outside the small house he had helped us find. It was nothing like the Whitmore home. Smaller, simpler, quiet. But when I stepped inside, something shifted in my chest. For the first time in over a year, I felt something I had almost forgotten: control. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen while Isla sat in her high chair, banging a spoon happily on the table. Nathan stood beside the window, watching her. "We're going to rebuild this," he said quietly. I nodded, because the truth was that revenge had never been the point. What mattered was that the truth had finally been heard. And sometimes that is how justice actually arrives. Not through anger, but through patience, evidence, and the courage to speak when the moment finally comes. If you have ever felt trapped in a situation where your voice was twisted and your reality questioned, remember this: truth has a strange way of surviving even the quietest rooms, and when the right moment arrives, it can change everything. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts below. Stories like this remind people that they are not alone, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply hold on to the truth until the world is ready to hear it.